30% of Defence Force staff have left in 2 years. It sounds like the Defence Force is close to collapse.
No, it's not. They've had a 30% attrition over 2 years. Obviously, they've recruited over that period of time as well.
To make up that 30%, though?
So the net effect is we're about 10% down, roughly 900 personnel down. It's still a gap. And of course, a lot of the ones who've been recruited in the last couple of years won't be fully skilled and capable, so their training still continues. And we still have an effort to go to fill that gap.
So to fill that gap, while we're trying to fill that gap, we are in a period of vulnerability. We've got ships tied up at Devonport, planes have been retired early. The cyclone response to Gabrielle was compromised. Are we vulnerable right now?
It's not correct to say that the response to Cyclone Gabrielle was compromised. We responded. It was the biggest peacetime deployment of our Defence Force.
But they couldn't do everything they wanted to do.
They did everything they needed to do in Cyclone Gabrielle. I think the risk was that had there been another incident or event, either in New Zealand or in the Pacific Islands, which we normally respond, we would have struggled to respond. As it was, at the tail end of our Gabrielle response, there was a cyclone in Vanuatu, and we were able to send people up there to help with the humanitarian assistance.
But are we still in that position where we would struggle to respond if we had a serious local disaster and a Pacific disaster?
Yes, we would struggle to do the sort of things that would be expected of us. We would mount a response, but it wouldn't be what we might have been able to do, say, 3 or 4 years ago.
So, $400 million pay boost, this makes military pay, in your words, close to market rates, or at. Doesn't sound like enough to entice that 10% back in.
We're not going to get everybody back who's left. We'll get some back. I think the immediate effect is that resignations that had been tendered more recently have been withdrawn. Certainly the response I've had during the week is that it has been received very positively. It has been a huge morale boost. Up until now, the response has been to the attrition problem as one-off lump sum payments, but actually what personnel wanted to see was a structural increase in their pay. But we will now be able to do that, and that will make a difference.
So $60 million was paid out in a lump sum payment earlier this year. Is that something, now you've put these pay boosts in as well, but are you still going to have to put like another $60 million lump sum bonus retention payments in every year to try and get the Defence Force back to full capability?
Look, we'll continue the effort that we do go to recruiting. We're still getting a lot of interest in folks who want to join our services. There's the investment in the training that's required. I think one of the reasons that people have left in their numbers they have in the last couple of years is that as a consequence of Operation Protect, which was the MOQ facility operation, a lot of people just didn't get their regular training and upgrading of skills that they should get, and so they left. So we're now reinstating all of that. And doing the recruiting.
So it takes time to get the best and the brightest back, doesn't it?
Sure, but we're on a good track, and we now have this the pay boost, and it will make a difference.
Doesn't the decline in the military capability come at exactly the wrong time, given the jostling for position, say, in the Pacific?
Well, the reason why I made it my top priority as Defence Minister when I came in, got the information about it, is to make sure that we don't suffer the long-term consequences of the attrition that we've been having, and I'm confident we will turn that around. At the same time, we have a defence policy review underway. That's giving us a fresh assessment of our strategic challenges that we've got, and we can make some decisions long-term about that.
That's a long-term thing. It's not due till mid-2024, but given the geopolitical tensions at the moment, both on our doorstep and around the world, does that not need to be brought forward to be expedited? Oh
no, the first reports I'm expecting in the next few weeks, so we will get that. The strategic review and the Future Force Principles document will come out over the next sort of few weeks and months. And then that will allow us to then make the long-term investment decisions.
Are we in this position because we've only been spending 1% of GDP on defence, unlike, say, Australia and other countries which are meeting the 2% NATO benchmark?
Yeah, we've been at that figure for some time. I think the reality is that investment decisions have been deferred for a long time. I mean, when Ron Mark was Defence Minister, he led the way to get investment in new platforms and new kit that were long overdue. So we've got the new Poseidon P-8A aircraft, we've got the new Hercules. The Hercules airframes that we are flying right now, pending arrival of the new ones, are nearly 60 years old. It's because we just successively put off what are expensive investments, but are necessary investments to upgrade our capability.
So is the state of our Defence Force making us the weak link in terms of our allies?
No, not at all. We make our contribution. We're back to exercising on a regular basis with our traditional partners and allies, Australia, the US, France, UK, and we're going more into the Indo-Pacific. So we are picking up the partnerships and relationships that we had pre-COVID and making our way.
Okay, partners and relationships. Let's talk about that. Chris Hipkins is going to meet Joe Biden in Port Moresby soon, where the US could sign a defence pact with Papua New Guinea. So these allegiances are being solidified and locked in the Pacific. Where do we stand?
Well, we have a range of partnerships and alliances. I mean, our principal, in fact, our only real formal ally is Australia. We have a very strong relationship. We've had a strengthening relationship with the US over some time. But likewise, countries like Japan, like South Korea, we're building our relationships with all of those. Obviously, a critical part of our work is in the South Pacific. We have very strong relationships with our Pacific neighbours, and we will continue to
But it seems like we
those.
are gradually choosing a side in what is happening in the Indo-Pacific, and that is against China.
No, I think we look to our interests and we look to the things that we value. And we value open democratic countries. We embrace and support multilateral arrangements, including in the Pacific, so things like the Pacific Islands Forum. That's what we are about. We will speak against and oppose those who might weaken those who might pull it apart. But we will work on our partnerships and relationships that serve our interests and the demands on us, which includes protecting the Pacific and working with Australia.
I mean, you're a straight talker, and that sounds like diplomatic speak.
I'm not quite sure what you think there's wrong with what I've said. It is the reality. It is the reality of we have diplomatic relationships, we have military relationships, we have trade relationships. If you're worrying about picking sides, just this week, New Zealand defence officials have been in Beijing for our regular defence dialogue with China. We maintain a dialogue with China. China is doing what it considers it needs to do in its best interest. It's growing its wealth, it's feeding its people.
But it also wants to expand its political and security reach.
It has a style of conduct, I think, on the world stage that some of us find unattractive and unappealing, and we think that some of the approaches they take to some of our friends in the Pacific and beyond is unhelpful.
Like, what do you mean by
we talk to China about that, but in the end, we make decisions that ensure that we can do what is expected of us with our neighbours in the area that we're in, and we make our contributions on a principled basis in other parts of the world.
One of those decisions that you're going to have to make soon is whether to join up to AUKUS. Can you give us some clarity on that?
Well, AUKUS is principally a technology transfer agreement. So Australia wants high-powered submarines. They're going to get nuclear-powered submarines, conventionally armed but nuclear-powered.
And we know all that.
So they've got that. What they also want, and the three countries that make up AUKUS, Australia, US, UK, they're also going to do what all countries are doing, including us at the moment, and developing other technology that's relevant to our ability to defend our countries. Some of the technology development stuff they are talking about doing, we might have an interest in being part of as well.
Right. So
things like cyber security, things like AI, things like quantum computing, stuff that you need to deal with, encrypted platforms and what have you. And so it has been raised with us that we might be asked if we are interested in participating, but no ask has been made yet, so the issue hasn't come up.
Nanaia Mahuta has told us that officials are actually discussing the detail, but there isn't enough visibility at the cabinet level. Do you agree with her?
Well, Cabinet hasn't had anything to consider. So
right, so it hasn't gone to Cabinet. Okay.
And in fact...
But defence officials are looking at it, right?
Well, there's talk about what might happen. In my discussion with Richard Marles, the Australian Defence Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, when he was over in the beginning of April, and the issue about AUKUS and Pillar 2 came up, and he just said, look, it's just undeveloped. We're just nowhere near that at the moment. So don't expect anything soon. So that's where that's at.
When you get that detail, would you be keen?
Look, in the end, that'll be a decision for Cabinet, but it'll be based on what is it that New Zealand wants or needs, and what is the best way we continue to make our contribution. What is the best way we strengthen our relationships and our partnerships?
So if we sign up to that, is it a signal that we are sort of like giving up on our independent foreign policy, that we are choosing a side?
Well, we've had, I think, what you would describe as an independent foreign policy for the best part of 40 years. An independent foreign policy isn't being in isolation. over that 40 years, we have strengthened our partnerships and relationships with all sorts of countries, including the US and obviously with Australia. As I say, France. I mean, we have a close, Australia, New Zealand and France have a close relationship in the South Pacific. With the UK, with European countries that are coming down now, taking an interest in the Pacific, and with other Southeast Asian countries. So an independent foreign policy is about us having the agency and the ability to make decisions in our best interests, and that's what
Does it get confusing for people? I mean, you know, we want to support Pacific whānau, we want to have intelligence cooperation through Five Eyes, but we won't pick sides when it comes, because we've got trade with China and we've got military up in China. It's quite a confusing policy for people.
I don't think it is. I think it's values based, and the reason we're supporting Ukraine is because, and we're far, far away from Ukraine, but it is in our interest because what Russia has done is invaded Ukraine, illegal and an unprincipled conflict. As a small nation state, we depend on the international rule of law to be upheld. And when we see it breached in an egregious way, it's in our interests, on a values basis, to participate in the worldwide effort to push Russia back in that respect. Likewise, if we see a country like China acting in a way that is in breach of international rule of law, we will have a dialogue with China about it. We stand on our values and in our best interests.
Let's talk cyber warfare now. State actors, including Russia, make up 1/3 of the cyber security attacks on New Zealand. Defence was supposed to take increased cyber defence capability to Cabinet last year in June. What has happened to that project?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was necessarily correct they were meant to take something to Cabinet. The reality is there's an all-of-government...
That's what it said on their website. That's where I got the information.
Yeah, and I think they've since conceded that that was wrong. There is an all-of-government effort because the intelligence agencies, or particularly the GCSB, has a critical role in this. All countries are looking to what we can do to provide better defence against cyber attacks, and we are. And you'll just
so is that something that Cabinet is considering very soon, an all-of-government response in terms of upping our defence against cyber attacks?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at first of all is to make sure we've got a coherent sort of administration around it, and then there's the means we have for it, and we do that, and we're working with the private sector in particular, our critical national infrastructure, to make sure they're protected. What happens in the defence space, we've talked specifically about the defence space, obviously the future of kind of warfare, if you like, is more and more warfare is conducted in remote terms, and actually being able to interfere with the communication systems that allows that to be prosecuted is important. Every country is looking at that, and we'll be no different.
And are we considering a cyber attack capability, like Australia says that it does? It's equivalent to our GCSB. The Signals Directorate openly says it conducts offensive cyber operations. Is that something that we do, or something that we're going to consider?
Well, our focus is on defending our networks and the private sector operators that we look to through our products like Cortex and malware-free networks. That's what we do. When it comes to any offensive capability, to the extent that we would have any, and this will be a question I suspect that the Defence Policy Review will look at, what we might want to do is have the ability to disrupt or interfere in those foreign military activities that do pose a threat, and that we could effectively interrupt as well. So that's where it would go, but I'm looking more to the Defence Policy Review to determine what.
Right, but that sounds like it is under consideration by Defence.
Well,
isn't it?
Look, every self-respecting military administration is looking at that, because the future of a lot of military conduct is now done in the cybersphere, and you've got to have the means to deal with it and protect yourselves and defend yourselves.
Okay, it's election year, and obviously cyber attacks are going to be probably one of the headaches that everybody has to deal with. What have you been told that could happen in terms of cyber attacks on New Zealand for this year?
I don't think the risk is any less than it was in 2020 and even perhaps 2017, but it is a reality, and the GCSB works closely with the Electoral Commission and with others. The SIS briefs political parties, both those in Parliament and those outside of Parliament, who have a material prospect of getting into Parliament, about the risks and the threats, and make sure that they are protected against those.
Have they briefed you as Minister? Have they briefed you as Minister about potential increased risk during election year?
Oh, look, they brief me, they brief the leader of the opposition, they brief other ministers. I mean, there's nothing particularly unusual about that. But I think it's about being across where threats are coming from. We know that countries like Russia are major users of kind of cyber attacks to try and disrupt. There are other countries too, North Korea, Iran, China has been called out as well. Okay. So these countries are all into this sort of
But you don't think there's an increased risk this year? That's what I'm just trying to get at.
I don't think there's no more risk than there was in 2020, and that risk was material and significant then, and it's about being across that and understanding and taking protective measures against it.
Defence Minister Andrew Little, tēnā koe, thanks for your time.